sun has drawn us, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. For those of you who had the opportunity, how's that lunch? All right. There are some compostable, I can never say that word right, bins. They're green, which makes them really easy to find. Please, please, please put all of your waste in there. We're trying to make this a zero waste event. We appreciate all your help in that. We are waiting for one of our keynote speakers to arrive, but before that happens, I would actually like to invite Council President Kathy Lantry in one of her last official events before she joins us as the Director of Public Works to come up and read a proclamation for all of you for this afternoon.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Tom. Thanks to everybody, although it does seem sort of weird that this is one of my last official acts. I love this event, but what it reminds me is singing the Black National Anthem. I sing really loud, and I am a terrible singer, and that song is so moving, and all I could think as I was belting it out is I should be quiet because the people who know how to sing it do such a better job. So I always appreciate the invitation to be asked here to read this proclamation, and I realize there's a ton of information and words on this page, but when people gather to have conversation and a meal, that's the only way we're going to sort of really talk about issues. So I'm happy to read the proclamation. It's a little wordy, but it also is a way to put sort of an official point on why we take this time to stop for a second and have good conversation. So this passed at the City Council on Wednesday, and it reads as follows: Recognizing African American History Month 2015. Whereas African American History Month, as we know it today, started its month-long observance in 1976 to celebrate the African American people and to highlight the role African Americans have played in the development of medicine, politics, government, community leadership, science, business, religion, education, literature, theater, music, arts, sports, and many other areas of our civic and national culture. Whereas during this month, we recognize the courage and tenacity of many hardworking Americans whose legacies are woven into the history and fabric of our city and our nation, and honor the extraordinary achievements of African Americans and their essential role in shaping our community. Whereas this year's observance of African American History Month in the city of St. Paul and Ramsey County will be a centennial celebration of Black culture, life, and education in a local and national perspective. Whereas this year's events will include panel discussions titled African American Culture and the African Diaspora Experience, Implications of the Legal System in Shaping the Black Experience, and Education and its Impact on Black Progress and Identity. Whereas the insights and experiences of these community members will allow a shared and deeper understanding of the complexities and unique characteristics of the African American experience. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the St. Paul City Council recognizes February 2015 as African American History Month with the theme A Centennial Celebration of Black Culture, Life, and Education in a Local and National Perspective. And be it further resolved that the City Council encourages all residents to join in learning about and celebrating the contributions and achievements of the extraordinary individuals whose lives have shaped Black culture, life, and education in St. Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I get into the proclamation, I just want to publicly thank Council Member Lantry. We represent the same constituents for the city and for the county. It's so important for those constituents to have their elected representatives work well together. And for 14 years, our constituents couldn't have had a team that worked for them in representing them on the city council and the county board. And I just want to thank you for years of guidance, years of putting together projects that have been successful for our community and in the region at large. And wish you the best of luck starting Monday morning. I hope it doesn't snow until at least Tuesday. So, and I do want to just ask you in advance for an apology. This is my third year being a part of this celebration here, and I've been able to stay, but schedules get complex and you will see me walk out the door, and it's not because of the panelists. I think you've just got a great panelist, and I'm really missing the opportunity to be here, but I do need to be at another meeting by 1 o'clock, so I'll be leaving, and I ask for your forgiveness for that. And I'm going to read you a proclamation that the Ramsey County Board put together, and this is on behalf of all 7 of us on the Ramsey County Board and all 3,900 employees in Ramsey County. Whereas 100 years have passed since Carter G. Woodson founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History in 1915 to promote and preserve African American history and culture, and whereas Woodson's organization provided the roots for the foundation of Negro History Week in 1926, Black History Month in 1976, and National Black African American History Month in 1986. And whereas the year 1915 also marked the beginning of the Great Migration of 6 million African Americans from the South to the northern states, from 1915 to 1930 and from 1940 to 1970, for economic gain, social equality, resulting in unprecedented opportunities, progress, and triumphs, as well as untold challenges, disappointments, and racial barriers that contributed to the past and ongoing civil rights activism. Whereas the Ramsey County and City of St. Paul Employee African American History Month marks the centennial year with a series of programs during February that conveys both recognition of the significance of Woodson's Foundation event and how since that time historic and contemporary African American culture, justice, education contributed to the challenged, continued to, and challenge our community. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners that the month of February is African American History Month in Ramsey County, and be it further proclaimed, Ramsey County Board of Commissioners urges all Ramsey County employees and residents to reflect on Carter G. Woodson's foresight and determination and acknowledge our indebtedness to African American individuals and communities throughout the United States for their sacrifices, inner strength, influences, and accomplishments that have reshaped and transformed our country's cultural, social, political, and economic climate during the course of this century, and resolves to carry forward the efforts and celebrations of those who came before us and those who are present today to ensure the message of racial equity and inclusion stays in the forefront of our thoughts and actions each and every single day. I just love this proclamation because it talks about where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going, and how much farther we still got to go. We celebrate. We've come a long way since 1915, but not nearly as much as we should have. And we've got a long ways to go, and we need to do that with each and every one of you in this room. So it's my honor to be able to share this proclamation with you today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is great to see you all here in celebration of Black History Month. And as the month is coming to a close, I hope that we have had a chance to reflect over the last 4 weeks where we're at, where we've been, and where we need to go as a community to make sure that when we talk about Black History Month, when we talk about Black history and the history of all the communities of color in the city of St. Paul, we recognize that while we have done so much and come so far, there is still a long, long ways to go. You know, the challenges that we face in this community are really ones that I truly believe we can meet head on. But it's not going to be because we just come together and eat good food and have a couple of days of celebration of Black History Month. It's going to be because 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, we dedicate ourselves to living up to the challenge that we set before us. which is to create a truly equal society for all, to create a community that every child has a chance to grow up and be their absolute best, to create an education system where every child matters, to create an education system where every child is valued, to create an education system where every child graduates and goes on to college and becomes a productive citizen. And the time is now. It is not 5 years from now, it's not 10 years from now, it's not sometime distant in the future, unnamed. It is today. That challenge is before us today. And the conversations that have occurred just during the course of this last year have been difficult ones. They continue to be, and they will be. But that's the nature of racism. That is the nature of oppression. That is the nature of inequality. You can't solve it by doing easy things. You solve it by doing tough things. And I truly believe that in the city of St. Paul, we are willing to make those tough choices, to face those tough battles, because we know how important it is. We know morally we are obliged to do everything in our power to end discrimination, to end the achievement gap, the employment gap, the housing gap, and every other gap in this community. We have an economic imperative to do it as well, because the greatness of this community, of this state, is threatened by the continuing and the persistent inequality between the white community and communities of color. We can't continue down the path that we have. I'm convinced that where we're at is not a result of purposeful or intentional discrimination, but simply not necessarily knowing the right thing to do, not necessarily knowing what to do, when to do it, how to do it. But I'm also convinced that by coming together with the racial equity work that we're doing in the city, in the county, and in the school district, with the community conversations that we're having through initiatives like My Brother's Keeper that was launched by the president over a year ago, by the hard work that we're doing to recognize where institutional racism has created a barrier for people of color, asking those tough questions and being willing to break down those barriers, I truly believe that in the city of St. Paul, we can create the kind of community that we all want to be a part of. It's not going to be easy. I was mentioning yesterday at celebration over at King's Crossing over at University in Dale. We were talking about Rondo. Robin Hickman gave me a book a couple of years ago from Uncle Gordon, as I call him. She's been talking about Uncle Gordon so long, I now call Gordon Parks Uncle Gordon myself. But Gordon Parks wrote a book called Choice of Weapons. And it's a fascinating trip through history for the mayor of the city of St. Paul or anybody that loves this city, just to have someone talking about the old days of Rondo, to talk about the experiences that he had as a young man moving from Kansas to the city of St. Paul. Talking about it on the one hand from a very positive standpoint, that ugly, ugly racism that was too often too prevalent in the South was not something that he necessarily encountered here. There wasn't this separation and the divide that he saw in the South. At Mechanic Arts High School, at Central High School, in the community that he walked the streets of. But make no doubt, he also made it clear that the racism that he experienced in the South was all too present here in the city of St. Paul. It wasn't something that was just a problem down in Alabama or Mississippi or even in Kansas. It was a problem that he saw by racists that he encountered as he walked down the streets of the Rondo neighborhood in the city, as he looked to try to find a job, as he looked to try to find a place to live. But somehow within his character and the character of this community, he was allowed to achieve that all that he was capable of, to go on to be the first photographer hired by Life magazine, to go on to be one of the most important and first African-American producers in Hollywood. Last year, Robin and I got to go out to the Gordon Parks Foundation dinner. She had to tell me all who these important people were. She's like, there's Vera Wang. I said, who the hell's Vera Wang? I don't never heard of Vera Wang. Alicia Keys. I knew who Alicia Keys was. George Lucas. It was kind of fun. I got to tell you, it was great. I knew a few of the people, but when it got to the fashion industry, I was a little weak on my fashion industry. But there was a determination in that room to keep the memory of Gordon Parks alive. And similarly, here in the city of St. Paul, we want to keep the memory of Gordon Parks alive in the city of St. Paul. But the best way that we can keep his memory alive, the best way that we can keep the voices of Rondo still lifted up, the best way that we can honor the legacy of all the African American leaders in this community, some living and some past, like Bobby Hickman, who had his going home ceremony just a few weeks ago, like Nick Kalik, who we were so honored to have as a city council member. We have the opportunity to truly lift up those voices, honor those spirits, keep those memories alive by dedicating ourselves, not for the month of February, not just a couple days a year, but 24/7, 365, to say we, as a community, will end racism in the city of St. Paul. We will lead the way. We will create an equal society. That's our task here. So don't leave here thinking, I've had a nice meal, I've connected, I've done my duty. Your duty begins today. Your duty continues tomorrow. Your duty will not be done until we, as a society, create the kind of equality that we know we're capable of creating. Thank you. Let's celebrate. Let's get to work. I was trying to avoid reading the proclamation because it's very small print. Whereas historian Carter G. Woodson led the first efforts to recognize African American history in 1926, when students, leaders, and visionaries fought to highlight the unrepresented history of African Americans. Whereas in 1976, President Gerald Ford officially recognized Black History Month as a time to commemorate the struggles, victories, and injustices that the African Americans have been subject to throughout our nation's history. Whereas in the words of President Barack Obama, as we pay tribute to the heroes sung and unsung of African American history, we recall the inner strength that sustained millions in bondage. We remember the courage that led activists to defy lynch mobs and register their neighbors to vote. And whereas Black History Month promotes the pillars of democracy for all Americans, it presses the ideas of social and legal justice, equal education, and equal political and economic opportunities and freedom for all members of our community. I proclaim February 2015 to be Black History Month in the city of St. Paul. But I also want to just finish by saying, next month, we celebrate the March to Selma. Let's take that moment. There's a lot of people going down there from the city of St. Paul. So let me just end by saying, march on until victory is won. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Coleman, for some very inspiring words. And while I will actually be down in Selma for the March reenactment, for those of you who are here, we are fortunate to actually have a March reenactment here in St. Paul that Sunday, I believe, starting at the Capitol. Look for some information on that as well. This is a day of celebration and conversation, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome up our next performance, which would be Toki Wright, American rapper, organizer, and educator as director of hip hop at McNally Smith, with students Jamere J. Hollywood Lewis and Lucy Valentine.
It's a great day. It's a great day at the courthouse.
He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
Dreams. Everybody has them. It's time to come together. We need to stop attacking the people that we love. It's going to take practice. We have to have faith, make it work like magic. separation, segregation, racist people devastated. Black and white, people hated. Interracial, we made it. We do it all for Dr. King, who once was a man that only had a dream for us to join hands and let freedom ring. So let freedom ring. Listen to these voices and let freedom sing. I know it's gonna hurt, but let freedom sting. There's many people out there don't know what freedom means, but there's a piece of freedom in every human being. So there's a piece of freedom in every human being. No matter of the color, the gender that you are, we all should be equal if we're all under God. Not saying that we're perfect, we are trying hard. That's gotta count for something, can we all just get along? Let's paint a perfect picture, a masterpiece. Then we all come together, a massive piece. Hate isn't born, you have to teach. So love and let live happily. Hispanic, Asian, white or black, no matter what you are, hate is whack. So move from the past, that place is bad. And we all need each other, so just face the facts. Just listen to these voices and let freedom sing. I know it's gonna hurt, but let freedom sting. There's many people out there don't know what freedom means, but there's a piece of freedom in every human being. We gather here today, and at the end of the day, for one reason. And that main reason is love. Can we all agree that we came here for love today? Can we put one hand in it, time for love? Freedom, justice, and peace. Can we all say freedom? Freedom. Say freedom. Freedom. Thank you guys so much. Lucy Valentine, everybody.
How we doing? Good. How we doing? Good. That's right. My name's Lucy. I'm gonna do a couple pieces for you, and this first one is called When They Asked What Happened. Also, can you hear me in the back? Yeah. You can hear me? Lovely. This is called When They Asked What Happened. I brought them flowers in a wicker basket. Little sun petals circling flat black holes at the country house that was left for them to rebuild past the hate of their fathers, past the rage of their husbands and the regulations of their brothers. Big open rooms remodeled to fit a blessing. And when the light hits just right, there's a purple you can't ignore. Sitting on grass as far and wide as other dimensions, with drops of light catching on the blades at all times of the day. And I came to find some questions for myself. But my throat felt like a needle flicked like the stem of a metronome, thinner and colder than a skyscraper of titanium. But weren't you always so? They asked me. Don't you remember? Let us remind you. They say you come here to make transfusions between lost blood and never holding your tongue. You hide in these fields until you're ready to be floating in oil, ready to hold onto your body, wrapped in someone else's lies. They say, we'll wait for your return again. Hold on to your back invisible to transplant you into a normalcy of recognition again, to remember the holes you hid, to remember you. We'll hold on to the seconds you could call beautiful and sprinkle them in books and sounds and healers and friends for you to discover. All you ever have to do is look. Thank you. And this is a piece called Hiding Doors. Can you still hear me? We good? All right. It takes more than a month to learn the legacy from my history. Time is endless in its ability to reincarnate, and we've been rapping like recording tape. Keep your seat, this will take longer than you can set alarms for. I am not me. My name is Audrey, I come from the intersection. I build coils of knowledge. My name is Shenge, I come from the sewing of scars. I make you face the trigger. I break the silence. I am Octavia. I give you escape, holding the same bricks of blockades where we learn together to make harmony waveforms grow out of pure concrete. We are sound itself. We are transients, always been burst you can't ignore. And I don't know much more than anybody else, so I pick these familiar names to reach quantifiers that a structure understands. And then I feel the prick in my brain to remind me ancestors hold entire galaxies past transphobic white patriarchies and the unobtrusive dissonance those black holes have learned to tolerate. Full of bodies of human goddesses that don't hold male weight, that can't think straight and classy never touched. We bless them with more attention than we can stretch our minds to contemplate, treating our forgotten without quarantine or secrecy in the homes they should have had all along. Noticing the light dust of shame covering us both the same as, and sent from a place we can't seem to find, is lighter than air we deserve to breathe. It feels like time to remember old ways of value for a reversion of strength. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I so wish that I had inherited more creative genes than speaking. At this time, I would like to invite our panelists up. We are joined today by LaTanya Daniels, Nikema Levy-Pounds, and Robin Hickman. While they're getting settled, I will read their bios very quickly. You never want to forget your mobile device. Yeah. LaTanya Daniels is a career educator in Minneapolis Public School District. She served as a support educator, teacher, assistant principal, and presently serves as the principal of Patrick Henry High School. A proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated, service is one of her core values, and she's currently pursuing her doctorate in educational leadership at the University of St. Thomas. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Nikema Levy-Pounds is an award-winning professor of law at the University of St. Thomas Law School and the founding director of the Community Justice Project, a civil rights legal clinic. Professor Levy-Pounds is also a civil rights attorney, legal scholar, media personality, blogger, and nationally recognized expert on issues at the intersections of race, public policy, economic justice, public education, juvenile justice, and the criminal justice system. In 2015, she was named one of the 40 under 40 by Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Journal. And in 2014, she was named a Minnesota Attorney of the Year by Minnesota Lawyer and was named one of 50 under 50 most influential law professors of color in the country by Lawyers of Color magazine. She has a heart for people and works toward achieving justice for those whose voices are often unheard within society. Please join me in welcoming Professor Nikema Levy-Pounds. And finally, Robin Hickman is the CEO and executive producer of Soul Touch Productions, a television and film production, youth development, and community engagement consulting company with a mission to make meaningful media and produce powerful social impact experiences. The business of Soul Touch and Robin's personal commitment is to plant seeds of hope and present visions of possibilities. She is the founder and curriculum developer of the Loving the Skin I'm In, Healing and Hope movement. For over 10 years, Lovin has engaged multiracial and ethnic girls and young women on a journey of exploring societal standards of beauty and media influences on self-esteem and identity. The movement serves as a catalyst for personal development, social enlightenment, and cultural enrichment by nurturing and promoting the positive and powerful voices, images, and visions of our youth. In the footsteps of Gordon Parks is a Soul Touch Youth Development and Community Partnership Initiative, which honors the life and works of artist, media maker, and social advocate Gordon Parks. The initiative's efforts include a Gordon Parks Memorial Movement, a Choice of Weapons Youth Development Institute, and Parks Legacy Celebrations. Taking Our Place Center Stage is an Ordway Center and Soul Touch Partnership initiative which deeply engages community members of African descent in Ordway performing arts experiences and other organizational wide opportunities. Equally important is the Ordway's engagement in the Black community. Robin is a St. Paul native, graduate of St. Paul Public Schools, and received a BA degree from Howard University. She participates in worship in Camphor United Methodist Church. Ooh. Please join me in welcoming Robin. So I'm thrilled to be moderating with three distinguished African-American women. It's such a great pleasure. I don't think we've seen this sort of look before here in the city, so I'm very proud. Yeah, I do. I think it looks great. I, of course, am being biased, but that's okay. So we're going to get started here. Before we do, there are note cards in front of everyone. If you have questions, please write them down, raise your hand. We have some runners who will come and grab the cards and bring them up to me. To get us started, I would like to ask the panelists first. The school to prison pipeline has been pushing our nation's school children out of the classroom and into the criminal justice system. What initiatives have been successful in slowing and reversing this trend, and what barriers continue to hinder efforts, and what can we do about it? Okay. Robin.
As the elder on the panel, over 50, I'd like to address that. Black lives do matter, and they matter even more when our history matters. And in addressing that issue, I believe that we've lived many of the answers we're seeking. As I sit here today, and it's very important that we understand that this is a community I grew up in. I walked to J.J. Hill Elementary School. I was greeted by a principal, Shirley Kaiser, who's here, who looked like me, and teachers who looked like me and understood us and had relationships. I grew up in a village that was intact to raise the children. That's not Hillary Clinton's wisdom, much respect to her. That's an African proverb. And we need to reclaim that so that we are that healthy village that raises healthy children. Again, it must start there. I grew up in a village where I have in front of me Mrs. Bivens, Mrs. Poe, a village of women and men and godfathers who taught us as children our lives matter. And that was our armor. What the children encounter today is not new, but we had a better way as a collective village in pouring into our children so that they would have that armor. Yes, and much due respect. I almost need to not say anything. Mayor Coleman just broke my stuff down. But coming from a village and a mother and a father who are now from on high, guiding me in the march and the fight to victory. But when you grow up and children grow up, and in Loving the Skin I'm in and other initiatives, when I was a little girl in the 4th grade at J.J. Hill, cast as Harriet Tubman in the play, learning about this sister, I knew I could grow up to be a woman that lead people to freedom one day. It's very simple. It is not that complicated, and some of us know how to do it, so therefore systems embrace the folks who know how to do it, to walk with these children so that we can begin to ensure they have a victory and a destiny, and that destiny is not incarceration.
That's right.
So Robin addressed that question from a community perspective and also a systemic perspective. As a principal, I have to ensure that the teachers who are teaching my students, or the staff that's working with my students, that they embrace my students as well. And my students look very different from the teachers that teach them and the staff that work with them every day. And so when I think about who's disproportionately in the school to prison pipeline, we know that they are students who have learning disabilities. We know that they are students of color. And those particular students, they need more love. They need us to wrap our arms around them and embrace them and support them more. So from a principal perspective, I see that there needs to be a shift in our thinking, a shift in how we work with students at the school level, at the district level. We have a punitive or consequential mindset when we need to have more of a mindset of how do we further develop and work with the student, and how do we further develop ourselves. So if I am working with students who do not look like me, how do I reach out and look for professional development opportunities, or when Principal Daniels bring in professional development opportunities to develop me, to work with students that look different from me, talk different from me, live in a different way from me, culturally very different from me. I embrace that because I want to break through these barriers that may exist that impede student learning. And I think that, it's so many professional development opportunities out there, and this shift in thinking that is not punitive, is not consequential, however, is development. It's changing behavior, changing adult behavior, as well as changing student behavior, which will, hopefully eventually end the school to prison pipeline.
Amen. Thank you.
This is an awesome panel. Can I just say that? I'm just blessed to be here. I would say that from a legal perspective, there are some initiatives that have worked effectively, such as restorative justice, where you try to take a holistic approach in addressing the needs of the child and trying to reintegrate that child back into the community. So I think that works on the one hand, but my honest answer is that I think the entire system needs to be overhauled from top to bottom. It is not effective at teaching African American children in a way that relates to their history and culture. So I think the school to prison pipeline is a manifestation of the denial of the humanity of Black children. We see it manifested in terms of high rates of suspensions, expulsions. We also see it in high rates of referrals to special education, referrals to alternative schools where many of our children, unfortunately, are warehoused in these schools. Obviously, there are some that are focused on their gifts and talents, but there are many that are really just warehouses. I visited many of these schools, and it feels like a mini prison when you walk into the doors. And so I wonder, how can we as adults sit back and allow this to happen and place the blame on the children and their families and their communities for things that we actually have control over, budgets that we have control over, personnel that we have control over. So that to me is at the root of the problem. It needs to be overhauled from top to bottom. And if people do not want to work with Black children within our public school system, then they should find another job. That's just the honest truth.
That's it.
Children are being treated like criminals within the system, and it's really unfair to them. They've already inherited a history that they were not responsible for, that they have suffered from one generation to the next, and now they're being penalized again. And we're saying that it's about behavior when really these children are coming to the table with the spirit of resiliency based on the things that they've been through, creativity, tenacity, and perseverance, not to mention gifts and talents that are being unrecognized and under-recognized. So I think that needs to change immediately if we're serious.
Professor, if I may add a question onto that. For those of us who are not in education, what are things that we might be able to do to help either overhaul or make changes?
Well, I think that we need to lift up our voices. As Robin talked about, being willing to publicly declare that Black Lives Matter and recognizing that policing is one aspect of the movement, but another aspect of the movement has to do with the overall quality of life for African Americans in general across the board. Not enough of us are standing up and demanding justice on behalf of children who we may not have given birth to, but who we should feel responsible for as part of a village. So showing up at school board meetings, paying attention to the narratives that are in the media about Black children, and seeing whether or not their humanity is being recognized or whether they're being disrespected in terms of how those narratives come across, and being willing to write op-eds challenging those false narratives. So I think that there are things that we can do as well in terms of championing school board members who are focused on equity, standing behind superintendents and principals who are focused on equity, and being willing to challenge those who really don't have the best interests of children in mind.
Great. Thank you. Robin.
I would like to, Sister and I were on a panel together a couple of weeks ago, and so this is, and as I shared then, it's like therapy when we can, it for real, because very tired. But to add to this, I'm going to be that voice that comes back to, I'm not going to believe that it should be anybody else's best interest, or will be. We have allies. I came from a village where we had allies cross-culturally. We need to get back to that. But at the end of the day, as great as J.J. Hill Elementary School was, okay, in the villagers did not leave it in the hands of the school district to ensure that their children had everything they needed to press on, because all of the children were under attack. Children that came from families that were struggling, and children that came from, we called the Kwanzaa family, up under Mahmoud and Katie McGuire and all that, because they knew that those two students that were strong would be under attack too. So the community did not leave the destiny of their children in the hands of any school district. So it gets back to the village. And today, when we talk about the resources and where are they being spent, until that, we'll never see it look like that again. And we had Representative Mindy Greiling was my 4th grade teacher that cast me as Harriet Tubman. So we had those teachers that got it, didn't stand before the children like they were our saviors. They learned from one another. They took heed to the wisdom of those teachers that looked like me, but or looked like us. But at the end of the day, we left J.J. Hill and went to the Institute of African Education, where we were tutored by McAllister College students, and went on the campus to see, as Black children, our destiny could be to be on a college campus. We had the community institutions. My father was a co-founder of the Inner City Youth League, but we also had Hallie Q. Brown, the Love Teen Center, the Ober Boys Club. It was popping at Parks and Rec, where we could go and be taught to be cheerleaders by Gwen Peterson. We had all these, I had to call you out. I had to give you a shout out. But we had those visions of possibility. We had it surrounding us, engulfed in us, basking in the power of what we could be. So we have to do that. And I'm in schools, sometimes 4 schools a day, with loving the skin I'm in. Or I get called when there's a crisis at such and such middle school where the babies are crying out. Why are they going to wait to the end of the school year to let some Black folks come up here? So until that glorious day when we see teaching pools become more diverse, school systems can commit to walking with the community resources, and not for free. They have to. We know we have to support our parents too to be involved. I've participated in Parent Involvement Day, where there's only a couple. As the village, we have to work up and support these parents to be involved. But as community resources, don't get to not talking about having a budget when it comes time to partner with people who know how to breathe life into our children. Because we need to get back to institution building. We don't have as many institutions in our community as we did when we were growing up. But those of us who know how to do it, then you got to partner up in the right way, so that we can build those institutions that can employ our children one day, that can serve as institutions to pour into them. That's what I'm calling out. We talk about racial equity. I'm not talking about economic equity.
Okay. Thank you.
Jesse, can we pick up on that issue real quick of economic equity? Because it just has to do with when you go into most school systems, what you see, I guess 96% of our teaching corps in the state of Minnesota is white, which I think is really imbalanced, number one. But number two, I normally see teaching assistants who are African American and behavioral interventionists who are African American. So there are inequities already built into the system in terms of who is perceived as being qualified to teach, who our children are sent to if there's a perception that they're misbehaving. And a lot of times they're Black people, but they are paid the least amount. And then they also, beyond that, have the least amount of power within the school system. So it feels like, it feels reminiscent of Jim Crow, even in terms of how that particular system is structured. So we do need to take a second look at that, because that's inequitable to begin with.
Amen.
So we're gonna go a little over. No, we're gonna go a little over.
You got the three of us up here thinking we're gonna end at 1 o'clock, right?
No. I time things.
Okay,
actually.
right on.
Yeah. I actually have the mic, so.
All right.
Yeah. So we're gonna switch gears just a little bit. I'm wondering if you guys can share some thoughts on what we can learn from millennials and entrepreneurs to capture the imagination of our young students, to inspire educators to try new methods for teaching and learning. What kinds of environment do we need to create or improve on in order for these methods to be implemented effectively and locally?
Want to start?
Tanya, would you like to start?
I jotted some notes about that. When I think about millennials and entrepreneurs, the first word that came to mind for me was, risk takers. They are not afraid to take risks. They are not afraid to fail, because they are looking for the opportunity to grow or learn from their failure. And so when I think about, as Nakima shared, my teaching staff or teaching staffs, they look very different from, I'm at an urban school, a very diverse population. And we want to teach in a way that we feel comfortable. We don't want to, it's very difficult for us to step outside of our comfort zone and try something different. It's very difficult for us to step outside of our comfort zone and try something that's more student-centered, something that's more student-relevant, something that students will more readily connect to. So when I think about what we could learn from millennials and entrepreneurs, is that we need to be risk takers. And we need to have a safe environment in order for the risk to take place. We expect our students, I expect my students to take risks, but I expect my students to take risks. And if they fail, they can get up from that mistake, learn from it, and move forward. And I'm going to help you move forward. And so, I think that it's speaking to what Robin and Nakima shared, is that, supports have to be in place for that to happen, though. Mm-hmm. Realistically, supports have to be in place. And so my staff, or staffs in general, they must feel like the leadership will support them. As long as we are working towards a student-centered outcome, and that's what it has to be about. It can't be about me. And I feel like a lot of times the work that we do in education is too much focus on adults and not on the babies. The work needs to be focused on what kids need, what's most relevant to students, what can students most likely relate to. That's what we need to be focused on, instead of, how adults are comfortable. No, adults need to move out of their comfort zone, because we are trying to meet the needs of students who are, YouTubers and tweeters, and that stuff is so foreign to me. However, they have quickly grasped that. So their attention span is no longer than 10 minutes. So how are we revolutionizing our instruction to meet that need? So I feel like in order for us to innovate, we need to see what our students are doing, and we need to meet them where they are.
Thank you. So, when you think about millennials, not just in education, but even whether it's in work or activists, and I know, Nakima, you talked about Black Lives Matter. How do we embrace what millennials are doing to make change?
I just watch and learn when I'm working with millennials, whether it's law students or the young people who are part of Black Lives Matter. They teach me so much. So we were at a meeting one day, and I was saying, can we get a copy of this document? And they looked at me and they just said, take a picture with your phone. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Exactly. So it should have been a no-brainer, but to me, I'm still just on a different track. So they always have really creative ways of doing things because they were born into this world of technology and social media, and also being able to multitask. And I think that that's foreign for a lot of older people, so we reject it. We stay in our comfort zones, and I think that hinders their growth and development. So I'm always open to new ideas when they're bringing them to me, and it takes humility in order to do that, to learn from people who are younger than you, and to not feel threatened by their ideas. And I think that a lot of kids in school are crying out for more excitement in terms of how lessons are delivered. They want to be able to incorporate technology more. They want to get out of the classroom more and explore, and they want to be able to use their gifts and talents, as we saw with the young people who came here and performed. In most school settings, there isn't even room for them to share their gifts and talents on a regular basis. There has to be a special assembly. When these kids are leaving school, they're constantly engaged in these types of activities. So I think we need to change the way that we do business in schools and take out the antiquated models that do not work and will not prepare our kids for the future.
Okay, thank you. I would amen that, but I'm going to sit here in the spirit of old school. And remembering, and I go into schools where when you're dealing with girls who have to take care of their siblings, and they're overwhelmed and they're tired and they need someone to stand before them as Miss Robin or Mama Lovin', and just give them that break to just be a child. Very important. Again, I have to go back in the spirit of Sankofa. The Sankofa bird is moving forward by looking back and being informed by the history. We grew up and we knew that our community godmothers and godfathers and elders believed in us, but there was something called rites of passage, where we were poured into to understand how we could be leaders taking our people to freedom. We were informed by some ways. So I think it has to be that balance and figuring out a way, how do we reconnect and honor the energy and the wisdom of our young people, but not let them do it without them understanding the importance of there have been some sacrifices, and they learn about women in her story so that they know that they stand on some shoulders of some folks who painted a picture of what victory could look like. Some women and men who died and sacrificed and died for their behinds to sit in them classes free. Right. To learn that it must be informed by the glory of the Sankofa bird is moving forward. So it's not stopping. He's keeping it moving, but knowing that there are some folks and there's some ancestors that made sacrifice. And that's one of the things. But with the young people, when you build a relationship with the young people, they'll hear about old school. They'll embrace old school. They'll honor old school. But we have to build those relationships. I love the young people that can teach me how to use my phone and do all that. I don't have the energy or the brain power. But we have to build those relationships, but it cannot be, no movement today I don't believe it's not as powerful if it's not informed. Someone, a pastor at my father's homegoing talked about my father and others taught us when we were kids that our lives matter and we need to keep shouting it out. But understanding there's a history of people proclaiming that. And there were some ways, and every way didn't work. And we need to stop doing some of those things. But some of those ways did work and contributed to our forward movement, even though we still have so much work to do. I personally believe it has to be the balance. And if I'm working with a young person who's locked up at Red Wing, or a girl out in Forest Lake, or wherever, they honor it when you build the relationships with them. And they feel more fortified to get busy.
Thank you. Wow. It's a very powerful words, and I would love to keep this conversation going, but I'm very mindful of the time. So I do want to thank everyone for coming this afternoon. As a reminder, this is a zero waste event, and to please use the green garbage bins on your way out for all of your food. I think our panelists may be around for a few minutes afterwards if you'd like to chat with them a little bit further. I would finally like to thank everyone for coming, the McNally Smith musicians that performed over lunch, hip hop and spoken work group, our caterers that made lunch possible, both Abundant Catering and Golden Time Cafe, as well as all of our panelists. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your words of wisdom.